Hola, dos. Hola, prueba, prueba, dos, 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 uno, dos. Hola, hola. Estamos bien. Ese micrófono.
Bueno, muchas gracias por participar de este panel, bienvenidos. Si bien varios de nosotros podemos hablar y entender bien español, como tengo algunos speakers que prefieren inglés y tengo una participante online, vamos a hacer el panel en inglés. Espero que esto no sea un inconveniente para ustedes. En caso de que requieran tener traducción, por favor, les doy unos minutos para que gestionen la aplicación para que puedan seguir el panel sin ningún problema. Si me dejan, voy a pasar entonces al inglés. Thanks all for being here. Thanks all the presence. Thank you very much to the panelists to joining to this very interesting discussion panel. The discussion panel is about decarbonizing industries, opportunity and challenges in energy transitions. So I would like to welcome all of you thank you very much for being here. I would like to make a brief introduction to the panel, saying that we know very well that the decarbonizing industry presents a great challenge, but also interesting opportunity to be considered. So it's interesting to discuss here in this panel. We know very well that industry can be a catalyst to lead this impact on climate change agenda. It's important to highlight the role that industry and company could play, being a significant leader in climate change strategy implementations and in the decarbonization, of course, allowing energy transitions, mainly running mitigation activities, but also setting ambitious goals that, by the way, also for others, for reach net zero emissions. Nowadays, we know very well that market and investor demand industry and companies to have an internal strategy to work in aspects related to climate change strategy. In this sense, it's important for industry to have a real and clear impact on the mission that the company generated. That is to say, the company has to know very well about the mission, the footprint, the CH inventory, know very well the source of emissions in order to work on that. Measuring this emission is the key to work to being able to managing these emissions and implementing a strategy for decarbonization and the possibility to achieve these ambitious goals for the decarbonizing economy in order to achieve international compromise, Paris Agreement compromise in line with science, to achieving the most ambitious 1.5 degrees. In this way, I would like to mention that EKI could help in all this process for the implementation of this strategy with several tools and services. We have very useful digital tools to help the companies on that, measuring and managing their emissions. In the sense, for example, EKI have a partnership with WOSE means World of Circular Economy, to jointly offering consulting services in a wide range of services through software as a services, for example, carbon ledger, carbon book, that make it easy for the company to measure their emissions, monitor this emission, and offsetting their emissions. This is in order to accelerate the trajectory toward net zero emissions. So in this way, EKI can help the companies to identify measures, to identify projects to generate emission reductions, can help to register in any certificate scheme like VCS with Vera. Here we have speaker, gold standard, GCC. EKI could help all the companies to register the project, to obtain carbon credits, to sell these credits, and generate an income for their commercialization. And this is a very interesting opportunity for the company in decarbonization and in implementing energy transitions activity like energy efficiency, renewable energies, innovative technology that we have been discussing these days in side events. So, and we know that the region has significant challenges in accessing to finance. So this could be an interesting opportunity for the company. The possibility to generate carbon credit, to generate an income, could help to overcome this barrier for access to finance. And finally, summarizing, we know very well that companies that are leader in implementing this kind of strategy for climate change allow them to reduce their emissions and accelerate the path to carbon neutrality will be those companies that will be very best positioned for the coming future, coming market. So it's a very interesting opportunity for companies to start working on climate change, to take advantage of this possibility and be very well prepared for the coming market. To advance with this discussion related to this topic and have here very interested panelists, speakers, I would like to present. We have here Maxine Rebolledo, which is Marketing and Organization Manager for AES, Timothy Ram, Managing Partner of Mercy Corp Ventures. Thanks for being here. Jessica Jacobs, which is CEO of Sureco and Partners. Susanna Heller, which is Senior Manager of Barra. And also we have the participation you can see in the screen, Sarah Lever. She's Officer Grow from Gold Standard. Thank you, Sarah, for being here with us. I would like to start with Maxim, if you want to present your and your company, what are you doing with the topics? And would like to start the discussion with a question related with what do you think are the main challenges we have for energy transition in the region, especially? I don't know, it's working? No, I don't think so. ¿Está funcionando el micrófono?
Yeah.
¿Sí?
Yeah,
Okay.
Well, yes, I come from the private sector, from AES. AES company that is actually global. Here in Panama, we have a huge presence. We are based in the US, and basically our purpose and our vision, our mission, sorry, is to accelerate the energy transition together. And that kind of sums it all up. That's the way we want to move forward. We want to do it together, and we want to move this transition in different pathways so we can have an holistic approach. And I'm going to steal some from what you said. I want to use that, and I like it because it kind of sets my approach to challenges very well. I see three main challenges, and they are connected one to another. They actually lead one to the next one. The first one is realizing the magnitude of the problem. It's climate change is what has us all here, and other events in parallel in the, around the world. And the thing is that I think we're still not realizing the magnitude. You mentioned that scenario of 1.5 degrees Celsius and how to get there. Right now, last year, UNFCCC with their great way to approach it with data. I love that because I'm an engineer and I love to have data behind my decisions. They said that with all the pledges that we have around the world right now, as we speak, if we make them happen, we would achieve a reduction of 1.8 degrees, which means that we're not even being ambitious enough. So it's first a thing of magnitude. So realizing how big the problem is, how we have to approach it, and how ambitious we have to be is thing number one. So by not realizing how big the problem is, we get to problem number two, the challenge number two, which is that we think that we have time to discuss, that we think we have time to argue about which is the best way to achieve a significant reduction in emissions to achieve those goals. And the things that we don't have time. We should be acting right now. We have. I like to quote Freud here. I know it's weird to quote Freud, but he has this concept that's called the narcissism of small differences. And this is how we base our decisions from our ego, from our perspective. In my case, you have a very diverse panel here. So we probably have very different ways to achieve those goals. And we should, instead of trying to push our perspective forward and as the only one, as the only way to do things, we should actually try and unite and do everything all at once, be ambitious and take action. And that takes me to the third part and the third challenge, which is because of that amount of discussion and not getting things right together, we end up with a poor execution or a mistimed execution. Basically, you end up with a you have we like I can tell you from our side, our clients want to decarbonize. They have goals. We're trying to help them to guide them. And what happens sometimes is that demand is there, but we've fallen behind with regulation, we've fallen behind with policy, we've fallen behind with incentives, permitting timing, we have restrictions in transmission lines. So, and that applies very well to the region specifically because there is a big potential, but it's not being realized because of those consecutive challenges that we're facing. So if one thing I can tell you from, I think, and I'm not gonna say it just from our perspective, but I think it applies to everything, is that we have to be holistic on the approach we take. We have to do it all. We have to do it as fast as possible, and we have to do it together. Right.
We can accelerate the decarbonization here in Europe.
All right. As I said, our our mission is to accelerate the transition of energy together. So it's a thing that we've given a lot of thought. AES is the fifth largest developer in solar around the world, and we like to we like to look at it in two ways: short term, long term. Short term, we are getting rid of coal. We are transitioning to transition fuels such as LNG. We are reducing. When you do that, you basically per megawatt hour you're reducing half of the emissions. So that's a big step forward. Instead of trying to make a radical transition towards an e-fuel that's still in development. But for example, with InterEnergy, another company, we're building a new plant that is going to be, at the first part of its life, it's going to be burning LNG, but it's going to be hydrogen capable. So that way we're thinking about short term, long term. So it's AES also is basing its solutions in digital and innovation. We are using digital platforms for our clients. We're using new digital products for ourselves to be able to predict better, to be able to provide better solutions, and innovating with the client, with the stakeholders, because we've tried it the other way, and it usually ends up with some kind of rejection because you didn't consult. So it has to be inclusive. And since we have this panel, I have this anecdote which kind of links up innovation and nature-based solutions. We recently had an innovation challenge. This innovation challenge, you had several mentors within the company, and you had a group of university students that addressed those challenges. So my challenge was very hard, I'd say, and very not specific. Was how can Panama be a part of the energy transition around the world? I mean, like that's like a big thing to take a bite of. So this what I was expecting. I'll be honest. I was expecting something like hydrogen hub, nearshoring, logistics. What the strengths of Panama? The strengths that kind of right there, right? Students come back to me with a question. They're like, "Well, we know what we want to do, but we don't know how to. We want the Panama to be a leader in carbon capture." I was like, "Oh, well, like is that all, or is it like no? We think we have a holistic idea to do that." So we end up with a project called Mangrove 360, which included reforestation, afforestation, obviously producing carbon credits. And it ended up with a really interesting ecosystem that included stakeholders, local communities, different sectors such as the energy generation sector, such as the logistics, such as agriculture. So what I'm trying to get here, and we as AES, we have really realistic hands-on solutions that we are doing right now. We're trying to do that as fast as possible, but we need we are believing in innovation. Innovation right now is at our core. And why is that? Because those hands-on solutions, some need to transition at some point to innovative and new creative solutions. And this will come from next generations, new generations that need a fighting chance from us to be able to create that next step, those breaking points that will actually get us there by the end of the century. So yeah, that's. You're welcome.
Timothy, if you want to present yourself, your company, and would like to ask you about how Maxim said before, how do you think that natural-based solution can help the industry to their commitment for goal decarbonization?
Yeah, thank you, and appreciate the invitation today. Wonderful to see so many people here. My name's Tim. I'm managing partner of Mercy Corps Ventures. We are a family of funds based out of the U.S., but investing across Latin America and Sub-Saharan Africa. Our focus in those three funds that we have is specifically in climate adaptation. So we typically don't actually look at the energy sector. We typically don't look at mitigation. However, climate change is all interrelated. It's the definition of systems problem. And so preparing for this panel was kind of fun because it stretches my brain a little bit in terms of how nature-based solutions in particular relate to energy, how they kind of complement each other in some ways, how they maybe have some different synergies. But I think for us, when we look at nature-based solutions and the reasons we invest in it and the technologies around it, is that, of course, there's a mitigation opportunity. We need to pull a lot of carbon out of the air as quickly as we possibly can. And as Max said, we can't wait. And we're guided by gold standard and Vera, of course, on how we do that scientifically and how we do that well. But we need as much innovation as possible, as much action as possible there. At the same token, for us as a family of impact funds, what we truly care about is how will those households, communities, nations in the global south that contributed the least to climate change be able to adapt and prosper despite climate change over the coming decades. And so with nature-based solutions in particular, we see that as an adaptation opportunity, as an income intergeneration opportunity, as a way for people to have agency to recreate their food systems, their energy systems, all sorts of things that will power the economies of the next decades ahead. And so within nature-based solutions, similar, I think Max brought up a great example, when we look at specific opportunities that enable or reduce risk around our energy systems, our food systems, mangroves are an incredible example. I think we've lost, correct me if I'm wrong, Vera Gold Standard, we've lost somewhere around 80 to 90% of our mangroves globally over the last 100 years. I mean, catastrophic for fish stocks, for weathering major hurricane events and so forth. And so restoration of mangroves is important, not only for those two things, but number two, to protect assets that are perhaps generating electricity, logistics, and so forth. Beyond that, when we look at even the Panama Canal here, and I'm sure there's somebody who's much more attuned, or even somebody from the Canal Authority here at the moment, but I feel like it's this, since I moved here a few years ago, this perfect confluence of where you have a critical piece of infrastructure that relies upon the watershed, and hence why so much of the area around the canal has been protected for over 100 years now to preserve the water that allows the canal to operate and allows global shipping to operate, and why we're seeing so many ships waiting 20 plus days out there because water has been reduced. And so I think the Canal Authority and other big players have been really thinking through this problem of that intersection of nature-based solutions. How do we conserve? How do we reforest? How do we preserve the watershed for this critical asset for our country? While at the same time ensuring that we're going to adapt and get ahead of future stresses and shocks that will befall this, and then Panama's ability to be a logistics hub. On top of that, again, connected to that system will be, and I know again Panama's been thinking through this quite a bit. Can we be a green hydrogen hub for shipping? Can we look at what the future of reducing our emissions in shipping looks like? And what would be the infrastructure to actually set that up? And so again, all these things are somewhat interconnected in different ways. I'm sure other people can speak to them much more directly than I. But the last thing I'll say on the nature-based solutions side is that there's no, I think at the top you mentioned, like, we have to understand the baseline. What are the actual emissions before we look at the different interventions to actually reduce those emissions? Again, from our side, it's that plus how do we look at, say, housing stock? We want to reduce the carbon emissions to build new housing stock, while at the same time making that housing more resilient to higher temperatures, more climatic events, weather events, and so forth. And so as we look forward to the opportunity to, again, recreate food systems, let's say construction, it's not only understanding emissions and reducing them, but how can we build better and stronger for the future? So I think in Latin America in particular, and one thing we've done in our work and other investments in Africa, is I'll stick with housing, there's a global housing deficit, a housing deficit in Latin America of between 25 million to, I think, 55 million units. So we need to build tremendous more amounts of housing in Latin America for people. In Africa, that's about 80 million, because Africa's population is growing pretty dramatically. We have a few choices in how we build that housing stock. If we're going to be very climate forward, we will try to build it with as low emissions as possible, because construction industry has some of the highest emissions. But secondarily, there's an opportunity to build that so that we can integrate technologies and methods, some of which cost a good amount of money, some of which are not necessarily expensive and rely on indigenous knowledge, green roofs, natural ventilation, and so forth. All these things, potentially you could look at carbon revenue streams and so forth. But the reality is, if we are able to find a way to collectively want to finance it and absorb that cost, we can build housing that will be more resilient, but at the same time achieve some means by reducing our energy footprint in that, as well as our carbon footprint in it. So yeah, I hope answered a little bit of it. I wouldn't say that's not, some of these interventions are nature-based, some are not. These are just simply different construction methods, but yeah.
Thank you. And since you are related to climate finance, what opportunity we can find in carbon finance, in climate finance, to accelerate this energy transition?
Yeah, and again, I defer to some of my colleagues in Vera and Gold Standard, because you guys are really at the center of this. But sticking to the housing example, we have one company we invested in. They're looking at how do you finance housing in sub-Saharan Africa. Everywhere in the world, but particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, availability of mortgages is almost impossible. And therefore, for somebody to actually purchase a house, it requires essentially an all-cash payment. So what this company is doing is essentially looking at how can they turn somebody who's paying rent into essentially credit history so they can rent to own that housing unit. And at the same time, they're using or attempting to use, would like to use carbon finance to essentially subsidize the cost of green climate resilient housing. So right now they're currently building housing stock that is as low carbon as possible, that is incorporating green roofs, other types of technologies that should make it moderate in temperature, should preserve watershed, rain gardens, and so forth. I don't think they've figured out in terms of what is the actual carbon revenue potential of that. Is it economic? That's a whole other kind of discussion. But it's something they're thinking about, because they can see carbon finance as a way to, in many ways, lower the cost of that housing, so it's more affordable, so the finances is more affordable. So that's one example. I think secondarily, there's a company called Sistema Bielbosa, which is out of Mexico. They have biodigesters for on-farm methane production, which can be used for cooking, and to reduce, methane output by use of the biodigesters. They've generated significant carbon credits out of it. I'm not sure specifically what methodology, but because they're able to very accurately predict and measure with IoT devices the capture of methane, the use of it, the use of those biodigesters, they're able to generate significant credits. And that, again, allows them to reduce the cost of this asset on the farm, which would usually be quite expensive for a small farmer in Latin America or sub-Saharan Africa. Similarly, there's companies working in the cook stoves space, which I know, again, Vera, Gold Standard have done a tremendous amount of work in. And again, essentially, how can households adopt more clean burning technology, which allows them to reduce their need to cut down firewood, to burn less materials, whether it's pellets, wood, what have you. And as a result, there's a reduction in CO2 emissions. There's all sorts of other benefits around that. And from that carbon finance, that again allows that company to reduce the cost of that device, which might not be affordable to that household otherwise. And so I think within this, and again, from like a household perspective, this is what we're seeing. In other companies at the moment we're investing in, they're looking at distributed battery networks that are solar charged. And so how can we have modular, decentralized energy production for electric vehicles, electric motorcycles in this case, that could also power homes. They have not pursued carbon finance, and I think there's opportunities for it, but again, it kind of rests on what are the methodologies, what's the cost to actually do the measurement, reporting, and verification of those things. And all those, I think, will be trends over the coming years where the cost for the measurement, reporting, and verification of these will continue to come down. There'll be new science-based methodologies that allow us to generate credits on the back end of it and show the additionality and permanence of whatever solution it is. And so, again, from our perspective, from a household perspective, we see carbon finance in some ways as like a small incentive or subsidy that reduces the cost of an asset. It's not going to make it entirely free, but it's an extra nudge, if you will, that allows a product that is beneficial for the environment, beneficial for a household, beneficial for the earth, to be slightly more affordable or to be financed in a different way.
Thank you very much. Jessica, if you want to present your company and continue the discussion with finance, what is the main challenge do you think is in scaling up finance for sustainable finance?
Thank you, Rocio. Well, first of all, it's going to be difficult to follow the level of your English, both, so I'm going to try to do my best. So I'm Jessica Jacob. I am CEO at my own company that I focus on consulting and advising. And I kind of built this company to try to make the best of the talent of Latin America and the Caribbean. So in my previous life, I worked at the biggest climate fund worldwide, the Green Climate Fund, and I was the manager for Latin America and the Caribbean. So I realized that, and speaking about the question at the same time I introduced myself, of the challenges, the majority of our countries, and not speaking about Africa and Pacific, they had the same complaint, and I don't want to offend any American, Canadian, Australian, etc., but that we have a lot of support coming from international expertise and companies. And sometimes it's not their fault. They don't understand the local context or the regional context, no? And learning from lessons from Panama, I'm Colombian, we're Colombian, to Ecuador, even not taking the different challenge from a country like Bolivia or Suriname, that even some South Americans not even know that they're a part of our region. And how can we try to find solutions, adapt to our context and needs, and scaling up, taking under account the private sector, the government, social society, etc. So that's the reason why I decided to quit to the biggest fund. Everybody said I was crazy, I have my big salary, everything afforded, education, health, and now I have to do my life. But I realized that in just 3 to 4 years, we have already more than 150 consultants. 99% are from the region, based in their house, in their country. And we just deploy always national consultants and look for expertise in the region firstly. So that's one of the challenges, to understand that local context and to learn, and as you said, having that holistic approach, not from the inside, but learning as well from great experiences. And I would say another challenging theme that it's that this linked on how do we articulate. I love this panel. It's the first time I met these two persons, Susanna, I know her already for a long time. But how can we understand, for example, the funding that they have available, the need or expertise that you're providing for the energy sector and solar, mentioning you're the 5th biggest, and how can we bring that to the rest of the region and even to the world? And on the scaling up on sustainable finance, so One is this articulation that we need to understand the different sources of finance. No, I worked for this biggest climate fund. Everybody thinks that it's difficult, but if you bring projects from the private sector, no, for example, you mentioned that you're focusing on adaptation and nature-based solution. That is what the main target of these funds are looking for, and sometimes they don't find that kind of projects, no, or need, or even from the mitigation side. No, we have had too many projects in that fund on energy, but you can mix, no, both of these now, biofuels, hydrogen, etc., new technologies, innovation. And I think that we don't have enough information and understanding of these different sources of finance. So understanding then the different sources of finance and the funds, the banks, the multilateral, even the NGOs, philanthropic and others, each of them have their own criteria of investments. No, so I would like to ask you afterwards, not now. No, what are your investment criteria, no, to then invest in a project or in a country or whatever? What are the groups of industries that, no, everybody has their own strategy, no? How can we leverage maybe not just one project, but something that has worked very well in my experience is working, for example, with the associations, the Industry Association of Colombia or the Banking Association. Also, trying to reach to these groups that they speak a lot and sometimes they don't have the resources to leverage, no, a group or mass of industries or financial institutions or others. No? So how can we try to get to strategic points and then see what could be the best source of finance, even if it's technical assistance or if we're looking for a credit line? I always, when I worked back in this GCF fund, everybody was like, no, we need to access, you're the biggest one. No, and it's like, but you knew that really those that are financing climate actions, mitigation, adaptation, or cross-cutting efforts are not this international or multilateral. No, we go to the World Bank and IDB and CAF and others. And at the end, those that are putting the majority of the resources are the national development banks. No, and the second one are the financial private banks. So we're speaking about financial institutions that are just right the corner, and we're thinking about those more difficult that are in Washington, or in my case, I have to move to South Korea to be in this climate fund. No, and we're going and looking abroad when maybe what we have to do is to speak to the Agriculture Development Bank. No, in my case, I work for the Development Bank of Industries and Infrastructure of Colombia. No, and we had to promote resources from our own government and develop credit lines that were affordable and that we understood the local context. No? Now with this, let's call it the revolution of carbon markets, and too many things to say about it, and there are others that are better experts than myself, but that's another opportunity of sources of finance. We don't have to always think about, no, again, a bank, a climate fund. No, now if we find the way, and one of the main challenges, answering again to the question, I am still working in a project, for example, in Suriname, and the Suriname is rainforest all around. We say, yeah, but there are other mitigation actions, and we're focusing on a project on the rice sector and the potential, no, of carbon markets in the rice. And then we realized that that could be even a co-financing source to access to other sources. But then we realized that the government didn't have a carbon market in place, regulatory or voluntary. So now you start seeing that you're in a point, you get no kind of a success case, and then you're thinking about energy technology for the rice and irrigation and others. And there's so many dots that you need to connect. And between this private and public, there's not enough discussions. No? So it was funny. Yesterday, I was leading the panel of UNFCCC, 3 hours panel, and it was the focus on private sector. Well, we had Andres over there from Mercuria, the only one really coming from the private sector, and the others were UNDP, World Bank, etc., IFAD. No, so at least it was good to see, no, how they are all relating to, but it's difficult to bring you, no, on board and have this kind of discussions, because each of the institutions, public or private, have different mandates, no, strategies, and that's something that we have to align. So one of the biggest answering to, again, to these challenges is how can we help understand the private sector and focusing on this panel, industries, first think what are their national targets? They have a commitment. No, how can we work with them? Because if they have a commitment, they're doing something to access to resources that even the private sector can benefit from it, because they have to be the arms and the legs to meet that commitment. So if we start trying to align, and I'm always, I say, I have, well, somebody's gonna kill me here, but I have never voted in my life. I don't like politics, but I help all of the politicians, right, left, center, so that's why I don't vote, because if not, they're gonna take me wrong if I vote for someone and then not for the other one. So I'm just there to try to help any government, and in Sureco, something that I love is that being the CEO, I can do the projects that I decide to do. And one of our visions is to take the most difficult economies in our region. So we work in Suriname, we work in Honduras, we work in Guatemala, in Nicaragua, in Bolivia. We don't reject the other countries. We have projects in Mexico and Ecuador, etc. But I believe that there are these countries that have a big potential, and a lot of private or public have not got into it. And there's so much nature to preserve, that's so many things to do, and even to attract the private sector, in Suriname, and I'm taking that example again, on technologies, they're so behind, and there's so many things that we just see in neighbor countries that we could do, on the carbon markets. I was speaking to Susana, say, let's go and help Suriname before the big wolves arrive and see the opportunities that they have in carbon markets. And it's not because of ignorance, it's because they need different points of view to help them, someone from the private sector, from the public, from consultancy firms, etc., etc. So there are so many challenges, Rocio. I think it's impossible to answer on these challenges, but I believe that to scale up this sustainable finance, we need to speak closer and help a lot the financial institutions, because they're financing, but they don't know what and how, and how can they bring additional advantages to these kind of concessional opportunities in terms, in interest rates, among others. So how can we link these supply and demand and understand some additional options like family funds, etc., on bringing this kind of additional capital to leverage this kind of carbon or adaptation on nature-based solutions. Challenges are few, a lot, and but well, there are people working all around, and we just need to articulate, and as you mentioned, Max, having a holistic approach will help us all to reduce this kind of challenges. Thank you.
And what are your recommendations for industry, mainly, to start with this strategy for commitment to reduce carbon? How we can bring them to this kind of discussion?
Well, we'll come back to one of the points, and I would say that one of my recommendations, it's important to understand, is like when you speak about your family, you have to see inside first, and then you go and communicate the good and the bad. Hopefully better the good. But at the beginning and first stage, and you mentioned that, Max, I believe it's you have to measure, to understand, and then to monitor, what is your impact and what are your opportunities. We don't have to think all of this as a black scene. There are more lights than what we could see as the challenges and regulations and others. So I would say, like, start understanding yourself, your in-house, your institution, your industry, your sector within the industry, because we have cement, we have so many chemicals and different opportunities and challenges. But then I would come back to these efforts of going to the different associations, and if you don't have one, create it. There are so many to be done, and it's going to be cheaper. You're going to access to more resources that could be shared. You can prove the advantages as sectors, so you don't have to point out your own institution, I'm doing good or bad. I have spoken to so many firms or from the private sector, like, I don't want to do a sustainability report because I'm not going to look well. Okay, but what if we do a sustainability report within the full industry, within the sector, and you don't have to point out names of the different actors. You just do an average, and you just try to show to your country, to the world, that you're improving year by year. Of course, it's led by the big ones, generally those that I work a lot with, financial institutions, that come from international groups, Citibank, Santander, no? But we see other cases like in Colombia, and I love my financial sector over there. The biggest bank is a Colombian bank, no? El Grupo Bancolombia, then you have La Vivienda, then, so you can see as well that you have this kind of actors that lead and they don't have to have practices from abroad. But it's really good to see, how as an industry we can collaborate. So that would be the first, having your own strategy, looking to your peers, and then you can grow to other, kind of countries or other industries to share. So one of the industries as well that I'm helping a lot, it's the construction and building. For example, in Colombia, they have a Camacol, that is the association. And then you have to split that, because within the association, you have the builders, you have the service providers, you have the materials providers, etc. And then you can adopt different strategies within them, and they might follow, the biggest ones, but at least you see that everybody's like a train, you jump into the train, you sit that in first class or in economy, but you follow the same road, and you start looking how to get to the front of the line and the train and get the speed that is needed, whatever, regardless of the size of your industry or the sector that you're in.
Very much, Jessica. Sarah, I would like to ask you to see your point of view on how can we increase corporate climate leadership. What do you think?
Okay.
It's working?
No, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I'm very pleased to be here because usually when we talk about energy transition, well, you talk about technology, you talk about a lot of things, but sometimes you don't consider the carbon markets or the standards managing carbon markets. I work with Vera. Vera is a technical secretariat for different standards, quality standards. Our better known standard is the verified carbon standard that generates carbon credits for the voluntary carbon market, but also for some specific regulated markets. Well, we have quite some experience with strategies and different opportunities and innovation for generating carbon credits for different type of markets. So I think that the main role that we have here as voluntary carbon market as standard is helping the different industries, the different sectors understand how the market works. What is a carbon market? How can you take advantage of the finance and the money that is available and willing to invest in the carbon markets? Also, we need to help different sectors to understand what a high quality project is. What do you want? How can you create a portfolio of different projects that you would like to invest in, or a portfolio of carbon credits that you would like to buy to fill in your commitments, because without carbon markets, the net zero commitments or even the SBTIs won't be possible, won't be real. I mean, every action, as much decarbonized it is, will generate some carbon credits, and we still need some carbon credit, some emissions, so we need some carbon credits to compensate those emissions at some point. But this cannot be done just because. This should be following some rules, and we do celebrate the VCMA claims, the guidelines for industries and sectors on how you can use and how you can claim the use of carbon credits. So we can also help the companies and the sectors understand this, because this is complex. This is a market, this has some specific rules, this has different rules depending on the country you're at, on the region you're at. And it's important for us as Vera to help different stakeholders navigate this complex system. And within these stakeholders, we work with different governments and help them create their national frameworks. We help them understand what we're doing, and we also understand the needs that they have, if they need some specific rules and requirements for developing projects that generate carbon credits or for purchasing carbon credits. We are there, and I think sharing this information, it's a very key role that right now nobody has, and I don't think we are the only ones, because I know there are several universities and NGOs working on this too, but this is getting more and more complex, and we've seen this week with the Article 6 discussions. What is Article, what? I thought it was just one, then it's suddenly 6.4, 6.2, and it's going to be so different. So we can see the private sector very, very confused, and we can help also navigate the private sector from the voluntary carbon market to the regulated carbon market. That is something that will happen, and that we need to be ready for that. Regulations are coming, so the private sector needs to understand, and the energy transition, especially in the region, will bring an impact on how we do business, on how we plan our investments. So this is something that we can help them understand. And I think there is a great opportunity in the region, because as we have seen also this week, many of the countries already have a specific regulation and are working on developing stronger regulations. So it's going to be very interesting to see what will happen in the next 2 years in the region with the carbon markets and with the national NDCs, and how this will be implemented.
Very much. And how do you think this voluntary carbon market can help the corporate climate commitment? How can help the industry to decarbonize?
As said, I think that we have experience with projects many years, and it is good to have here Sarah that has also great experience in carbon markets, because we have been experiencing a lot of challenges over the years on how to understand what a low carbon project is, what additionality is, what an activity that captures or removes emissions, or technologies, how this work and how this can be certified that you are really generating these impacts. So I think we have a chance here to help different sectors and companies there. As mentioned before in many panels, I see some familiar faces here. Now we also have to move beyond carbon. Carbon is very important, mitigation is very important, but now we have to start talking about the multiple benefits that decarbonization brings to communities, companies, finance, and using different standards to certify what you're doing in those multiple benefits, how we are advancing on the SDGs. It's very important right now, and especially for a region like Latin America that has so many needs and so many sectors, and I think we have a great opportunity here.
Thank you very much, Susan. Sarah, are you here? Can you hear us?
I'm here.
I would like you to join us to this panel, and I would like to ask you about how do you think we can increase corporate leadership? And you also mentioned about an evolution of carbon offsetting, if you can talk about that.
Yeah, sure. First of all, just introduce Gold Standard first. We've been around for about 20 years now, and we were created initially as a response to the initial CDM, the very first market mechanism, and our purpose was to ensure the highest levels of environmental integrity, as well as the promise of development that wasn't coming through at that time. So if you think today we're performing that same role, both in the voluntary space and, as we've heard already, as new compliance markets come online. So when I think about the new paradigm for carbon offsetting, I think it relates to the question about how do we increase corporate climate action. I think on the one hand, we need to make sure that the quality questions are answered. We've known that there's been a lot of talk in markets recently about highlighting these challenges, and we think that we see some advances happening, for example, through the Integrity Council for the Voluntary Carbon Market. We're happy to see them start to embrace the kind of measures that Gold Standard has been doing for many years around safeguards, SDGs, etc. I think it also needs to be put in proper context. So we see the new frameworks emerging. We mentioned BCMI, but I think we can even think bigger about corporate climate strategies that set a responsibility for companies to take responsibility for their residual emissions, to set an actual carbon fee so that they are liable at their bottom line, and that they invest that fee in climate action in a number of ways. So I think carbon credits can play a role there. But I also think there are different opportunities that we've heard, new technologies, they may not be so certain, advocacy that's needing funding. So making sure that companies are looking holistically across their climate strategies and using carbon markets in a very defined and effective way. In that, I think we also see a paradigm shift in claims. As we see, we've talked about the complexity that's emerging with Article 6. It's also making it challenging on the issue of double claiming. And there is inevitably some uncertainty in carbon markets. That's just a fact. We have to maintain a delicate balance between the requirements and for monitoring and the costs associated with that, with pragmatism and what's realistic and cost effective. And so moving to a new paradigm of claims where companies can contribute to countries' NDCs, they can finance climate action, and stepping away from these binary claims like carbon offsetting and carbon neutrality is an important way to kind of restore some kind of confidence in the market to more accurately describe what's being done and really set that as the foundation in order to scale up. And I think with that, you can really get consumer confidence and civil society confidence, which has been lacking in past years.
Very much, Sarah. And what do you think is the best practical approach to maximizing this impact of energy transition and industry decarbonization?
Oh, that's a big question. So I think something, if we're talking about carbon markets, I think we need to think carefully about how those are being used. So using a very limited pool of carbon finance for renewable energy where it's already financially viable is probably not the way to do that. But we're looking, for example, at the role it can play in the hard to abate sector and in the energy sector itself, actually. We've heard about the JTEP, the Energy Transition Accelerator. Gold Standard is looking at a methodology to decommission coal-fired power plants. We're also in discussions, not just on the energy generation side, but even further upstream, talking to an organization about capping existing oil wells, so on the supply side. Now, there are a whole lot of technical complexities that come along with that, and carbon markets aren't going to be the silver bullet for either of those methodologies or those approaches, but they can provide a way to ensure a smooth phase out, a smooth transition, and take into account the important considerations around just transition in that context, and think about innovative ways to structure finance. We heard from Jessica about the public and private sector not talking to each other enough. I think there's a real opportunity to look at innovative financial structures in energy and decarbonization and the energy transition to help make whole those who have already made investments, because it's unrealistic to think that they'll simply walk away from a financially viable asset, and to do that in a very robust, ethical, and structured way.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I think we are near to close the panel because we are on time, but I would like to know if there is any question that would like to make to the panelists. Yes, I know, you will. Question. We have a microphone.
Hello, I am Soraya Chong from Maya Motors here in Panama. We are a very small company compared with the global context, but in local context, we are not that small. We are selling, probably we are the best sellers of Honda in Panama and in the region in Central America and the Caribbean. and we are introducing Chinese cars. So we are part of the small market in a small country, and we are not the biggest player. But my question is precisely that. What is the opportunity for companies like us that we already set a target, kind of ambitious, for 2035 and 2050. We still don't know how we are going to do that. We have some options, of course, and some ideas. But my question is it interesting that some small company, kind of small, to try to be the leader? Because we think we are not that big, but a good lab. So maybe. I would like to know your opinion.
Thank you very much. I don't know who would like to answer. Okay.
You have several options, and probably I won't dwell on carbon credits, but for example, in AES, we do have some certification of origin for renewable energy. That's one way to address scope 2, for example, because you have a diverse grid in Panama, so that way you can basically not have double counted. Sarah mentioned it. Avoid double dipping in terms of using renewable energy for your consumption. You have certain certifications you can address as well, but that's I'll leave to the financing part. But you do certainly have a way to move forward, and it doesn't matter if you're small or you're medium or you're large. If you're the leader, you're the leader. I think I worked with you actually for a while. I was behind the Panamanian electric mobility strategy, and at that time you were a little reluctant, and I don't mean you. I mean as a company. And then something changed, and I realized it. And you had a couple of I'm not going to mention names. You have a couple of champions that started pushing beyond other large Japanese distribution companies. So I don't see. I encourage you. I said, please lead. It doesn't matter how big you are. It actually makes a difference, and you should do it because it may make other competitors look your way. And I think it was Sarah who mentioned it. It makes you more attractive to the public. The public wants this. The public wants decarbonization. The public wants a company that's aware of the environment. So I would encourage you to follow leading and follow through with those goals that you have.
Maybe to change the perspective, but if you're already kind of a leader or not in Panama, and there are bigger global players, but there are some opportunities within, for example, Panama. There's a project that was approved that I helped a lot with the Green Climate Fund, and one of the 4 countries that it's benefiting for those concessional resources is Panama. Now, so you can find opportunities, and that's going to be very concessional loans for different industries, including energy, well, clean energy, no? And now there are going to be these opportunities that are going to go through financial institutions, national financial institutions. So you could, if you learn a little bit more about these kind of opportunities that are difficult to understand or to find, no, you could access to very concessional resources, improve your business, get to your strategies and targets, among others, and then maybe become bigger thanks to these kind of concessional sources of finance to increase your operations or your impact or your access to other regions, etc. So there are some benefits of being based in Panama that could make you even more competitive if you understand, and if not, happy to help on showing a little bit the way of this access to additional blended finance that could help to increase the impact and the business itself.
I just want to add one quick thing that's not necessarily particular to you, but I think for organizations like yourself, we work with a lot of major food and ag businesses, brands I won't name, but There's some that look at the world that will take place 10, 20 years from now, where they're going to have data on every farm plot they source from to determine whether claims about deforestation, soil carbon, whatever it is, sustainability claims are true. And there are some that over the past 5 years, particularly in, say, cocoa, have built that data set. They've been tracking that for their own commercial advantage or in anticipation of regulation or anticipation of wanting to do carbon project development, whatever it is. And now with EU deforestation regulation coming online next year, they are well positioned to lead and actually have a commercial advantage. And so I think there's an opportunity in industries, and it's very difficult, and I think you kind of alluded to this, like you have to have those champions within a company who kind of maybe see that future, and you might be investing in taking in a cost before regulation or the consumer is ready for it, but if you firmly believe that's happening, there's an advantage to investing in that now so that you will be able to move quickly and take advantage of concessional resources, financing, whatever it is when that time comes. So I think we're starting to see that in, say, the food industry, which I know a lot better, certainly in electric vehicles, but I think in every industry that is coming. And so the little things you can do to prepare for it so you can really move when the opportunity allows for it, I think that's what you can start to do now.
Thank you very much. I think we are on time to close the panel. So I would like to thank you, all of you, to be here. The speaker, thank you very much for the discussions. And I think I will take the words of Maxime that we had to realize the magnitude of the problem, and we have to encourage industry to work on and lead the climate change strategy, climate change agenda. Thank you very much.